Branco.
Sim, senhor.
Trabalhei com alguém que era das donas.
Sim.
Hi, Commissioner. Thank you for talking to Euronews. Last year, the number of refugees returning home fell 17%. How do you analyze this situation?
Well, this refers to the political refugees, to people that had fled their country for reasons normally of conflict. What we have witnessed last year is that many of the conflicts that we were hoping to be solved or to at least be reduced didn't. There were massive return operations for different countries. And last year they slowed down, because violence is on the rise again in Afghanistan. Eastern Congo is still very unstable. In Southern Sudan, we have witnessed some ethnic conflicts. And so the number of refugees returning home, unfortunately, last year, even if we still helped about 600,000 worldwide, so it's a very important movement. Most of the refugees want to go back home. This idea that people just want to go to the rich countries is not true. The large majority of the refugees want to go back home as soon as minimum conditions are met for that. But last year, unfortunately, even if we helped, as I said, 600,000 to go back home worldwide, that corresponds to the lowest number in the last 10 years.
This summer, you asked for millions of euros to support your operation in Pakistan. You have accused the international community of being more preoccupied with banks than ongoing humanitarian crisis. Can the world afford to ignore the crisis in Pakistan?
Well, the world is not ignoring the crisis in Pakistan, and I must say that our operation in itself has been very strongly supported by the international community. But let's be frank, when trillions could be mobilized so quickly to rescue banks, it would not be very difficult to mobilize the billions. We are speaking of a completely different scale, to address in a much more effective way the dramatic humanitarian challenges we still face.
There are a number of islands that are at risk, including Maldives and islands in the Pacific. What are the challenges ahead?
Climate change is a global accelerator of the factors that cause forced displacement. One of the most dramatic ones, even if not the one that I would say has an impact on the largest number of people, but one of the most dramatic ones is the fact that some island states might even disappear. So that creates a problem of statelessness. And of course, in our mandate, we do everything we can in order to make sure that everybody has the right to have a nationality. But those situations go beyond that. It's not so difficult to find another nationality for those that might be forced to leave a sinking island. That would not be so difficult, I believe. But that is not enough, because that is a community that lives. It's a nation. It's a country. It's an identity that needs to be preserved. So there is more than the right to have a nationality. There is the right to preserve the identity of that nation. And that is something that is not solved. That is something the international community needs to think about. How are we going to address these problems? How are we going to find for these communities a solution that goes beyond just giving to their people another nationality, but preserves their identity and their future?
In Copenhagen, the main focus will be on cutting emissions. Do you think this focus is correct?
Cutting emissions is very important, but that is not enough. Even today, climate change is having its impacts, and its impacts are mainly in the most vulnerable countries. Many countries in the world that are poor countries, that are very fragile societies, will be the ones that will have a more dramatic impact of climate change, that are having already a more dramatic impact of climate change. And so, as important as mitigation is adaptation. As important as reducing emissions is to make sure that we give those countries enough support for them to be able to organize themselves to resist the impact of climate change. This is something that is needed now. And unfortunately, there has not been enough attention to that.
What Europe can do in that case?
I think Europe has been clearly a front runner in relation to the need to assume responsibilities. And I hope that Europe can also be a very important driver of the need of a comprehensive negotiation.
Everyone is saying that Copenhagen will be a failure. What's your message to world leaders on behalf of refugees and displaced people?
The message is clear. If a full agreement is not yet possible, at least world leaders should be able to commit themselves very strongly from the political point of view in order to make sure that in the months to come that agreement is reached. Without it, we would all be facing a disaster and nobody would forgive us.
It is clear that countries on the Mediterranean are facing a huge challenge with irregular migrants. How would you characterize European approach to this situation? And do you have any recommendations to improve the situation?
We need to make sure that in Europe we have coherence, consistency in the way the different asylum policies are coordinated among them, and at the same time to allow it to be possible an effective burden sharing, because the pressure on Malta or the pressure on Greece is much higher than the pressure on Portugal, for instance, at the present moment. And so we need to make sure that we have a coherent approach to refugee protection that is similar in the different countries in Europe, but an effective solidarity and burden sharing, helping those countries that face the first impact. It is also absolutely essential that Europe keeps itself as a continent of asylum, that Europe guarantees access to European territory for those in need of protection. Countries have the right to define their own migration policies. But in the exercise of that right, countries must make sure that those in need of protection are granted protection. The cornerstone of refugee protection is the so-called principle of non-refoulement. Nobody can be sent back to her or his country in which the risk of persecution is still there.
Which is the biggest crisis that your organization is facing today?
Biggest crisis, in my opinion, is in the minds of people. It's the fact that in today's world, we are seeing a huge threat to the values of tolerance that are absolutely essential to protect refugees, to treat migrants in a humane way, to respect foreigners, to respect those that are different. We are seeing intolerance growing. We are seeing racism and xenophobia develop itself, even in developed societies. And this is creating a very negative environment to refugee protection. So, more important than the crisis in some areas of the world or the specific problems we face here or there are the walls that are being built in our minds.
Thank you for talking to Euronews.
It's a pleasure.